Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Our Lives, your weekly podcast where we talk about things that will inevitably affect all of our lives. This week, we've got a special guest. We're joined by Fran O'Neil, who is a huge advocate and supporter of people with ADHD. Fran's very active on TikTok and other social media. And I think I, as somebody who also has ADHD, was really excited to get you on the show to kind of dispel some of the myths, to talk about what it's like living with ADHD, particularly for those of us who've been diagnosed in, I'm going to say midlife, not later life.
Yeah,
we're
forever young anyway, so age is
exactly. So what we're seeing now is more and more people being diagnosed with ADHD. And I know that the thing that I hear, and it really, really pees me off, is, well, everyone's got ADHD now, haven't they? Go on, Fran. What's your thoughts on that?
I think for me, the awareness about ADHD has gone through the roof, and a lot of that is down to social media. And you know, people. Some of the things like what I'll put out there is it's kind of what I've been through myself, and I got to learn about ADHD through social media. It was through the YouTube algorithm. When I'd just decided to go sober. It was before I got into rehab. And as a result, the algorithm kept firing me videos which started to make sense. Now, I've always questioned why I was a little bit different. I knew there was something different about me, why I couldn't do things in certain ways, or what I've since learned to be what neurotypicals can do in certain ways, and why me as a neurodivergent struggle to do the mundane tasks and things like that. You know, it all came from the awareness of social media. And I think that, I daren't say it has a lot to answer for, because I think it's a great thing that people are actually finding out about it. The stigma around ADHD is horrendous still. You know, people are still thinking it's that naughty child kind of syndrome, when in turn it's not. You know, I'm 41 and I found out about ADHD when I was 38. It wasn't a thing when I was at school.
I can completely relate, especially around the social media, because obviously my algorithm the way it was supposed to, and kept sending me these things. And I think for me, I was like, it was almost like, I can't remember a specific light bulb moment, but there were a series of light bulb moments, and I thought, oh, that makes sense. Maybe, and I don't know whether you relate to this, is maybe I'm not broken, because that's how I'd felt for 40 plus years.
Yeah.
Why can't I do? I'd see other parents at school be really on the ball and on top of things, and I'd walk past a sock for weeks and just think, brain, pick it up, do that thing, and it just wouldn't do it, and I could never quite figure out why.
I've always said that I have to do things the hard way, and I have to learn by doing. I can't be told. You know, and that for me is quite a hard pill to swallow. And I remember when my dad, when he was alive, he did say, it's like you've got an arrogance about you, but I didn't feel as if I was arrogant, and I just have to do things a way. And if they work, they work. And if they don't, at least I've learned from that experience. Not doesn't mean to say I won't do the stupid mistake again, you know, looking at drinking and drugs and things like that. But in reality, I have to learn by doing. And for me, that's a big ADHD thing. We can't just accept it is what it is kind of thing. You know, we've actually got to experience it ourselves to then go, right, okay, that makes a bit more sense to me now. I can move on. Doing the mundane tasks, Christ, they're just difficult. You know, putting dishes on the side rather than just putting them in the dishwasher, or everyone talks about taking the bins out. It's a bloody nightmare. You know, I will pack them higher and higher and higher, and then even stack on top of the bin, and then have to give myself a pep talk before I can take the bloody bins out, which is
bin Jenga. How many things can I get on the top of the bin before it's going to explode everywhere? Mm-hmm. But I quite often felt judged by it, and I also judged myself. I felt a lot of guilt up until the point of diagnosis, and I think if you're happy to talk about diagnosis, how old were you when you were diagnosed, and what impact has that had?
So I was 38 when everything came at once for me. because I decided to go sober. I'd gone into rehab, and the first meeting I had with a psychiatrist whilst I was in rehab, and my first question to her was, I don't align with addiction. You know, I don't go to drink to get drunk. I tend to go to drink or take drugs to quiet my brain, if that makes sense to her. And I remember having this conversation, and I said, I keep getting these videos fired at me about ADHD, which make a lot of sense. And her first response was, look, I don't specialize in ADHD. However, take these tests online, come back and speak to me in a couple of days, and tell me what the results were. And if you are looking like you are on the ADHD or on the spectrum kind of thing, then that's something you need to take up, you know, when you come out of here. So the impact it's had on me has been huge, really, because it all came at once. So going sober, I went sober in February. I got my diagnosis, I think, in May of 2021. And then it's been a massive journey of, I dare say, self-discovery, where I've had to start my whole life again from scratch, with this, I'd say, newfound knowledge or newfound understanding. And it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort and work to really dive deep into it, because you want those answers. You've lived a life without answers. You know, you've always questioned yourself about certain things. You've had the guilt. You've beat yourself up about why they can do that and I can't do it that easily. However, I can be great at something naturally, but then I get
Agreed.
bored.
Completely agreed. I think for me, I went through a very brief period, although it still does rear its head sometimes. It's almost like a grief. What could I have been? What could my life have been like if I was able to, and I'm going to call it the tedious stuff, if I was really good at just getting the tedious stuff done, if I was good at opening letters, because again, that's another thing for me. And I'm sure any of our listeners today who have or suspect they have ADHD, have a look on your counter and see how many unopened letters there are in a pile. And you know,
I've got one that are years old. I've got them in the boot of the car. I've got them
everywhere.
Everywhere. It's ridiculous.
But it did feel like that for me. It felt like a little bit of grief of what could my life have been like. But you can't live like that. You can't just say, well, what? Because it wasn't like that. It's as simple as that.
I do think you've got to make peace with your past. I look back and there's a lot of, I dare say, missed opportunities, or if I'd only applied myself, or, you know, there's, your brain's naturally going to go through that stage and that process of grief, which is what you said. And it's so true. But you have to go through that process, I believe, because it allows you to then draw a line in the sand and say, right, okay, I've dealt with that now. I'm okay with it. I can't change it. However, what I can do is learn from it and go forward and
Move
try
forward.
and take what I've learned and put it into a positive, rather than being in that negative headspace all the time, which is where we tend to spend a lot of our time naturally with ADHD.
Well, definitely a lot of time. You said something really interesting there, and I thought that's probably another common thing that runs through this. School reports that say, really smart if they'd only apply themselves. And I can see it written down by my teachers, and you think, yeah, if only we knew then what we know now.
Exactly.
That could have been so different.
I got tested, I think I was probably 10 years old, for dyslexia, because ADHD, excuse me, ADHD wasn't really a thing back then. And we're talking late 80s, 90s, early 90s kind of time. It was more of a thing in America, but over here, it wasn't necessarily something that the teachers were looking out for or parents were looking out for.
Yeah.
And it was one of the parents that said to, I think it was to my mum, I don't understand why his grades aren't as good, because when you speak to Fran, he's so on the ball with things. He's so smart with certain things, but obviously, you know, that's not transpiring in his results. I used to excel in sports because that was my outlet. So my mum sent me to get tested for dyslexia. I wasn't dyslexic. And then that was it. That was it. It's just, he is who he is. And I didn't know at the time myself. I didn't really have a clue. I was questioning things, a lot of things. That's what I tend to do. but then you have to try and make sense of it yourself. And I suppose that's where masking and everything starts, because you do what you think you need to do to fit in, rather than understanding who you really are. And at that age, I think you're too young anyway to figure that kind of stuff out. I'm
Totally agree.
That makes sense of it.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, absolutely. I do. I completely understand it, and I think a lot of us have been feeling the same way. And the awareness, particularly the awareness that you're raising on TikTok, and and I love your videos, and I know other people that watch them as well. It's about that sense that it's not just me. There's lots of us out there, and we're all experiencing that. I saw somebody say, "I've never had an original experience," and I think, oh yeah, I feel that in my soul, because we're all having these very similar experiences of our school life, going into adulthood. I dread to ask how many jobs you've had, because I've had a few, because my attention span.
Yeah, no, I have worked for others, and I struggle with it. I can't. I hate being told what to do.
Yes.
I hate being micromanaged, and so I have worked in down in London for other companies, but I've always been one to work for myself, because I learned pretty early on that I just disagree. I have to. It's the same thing. You have to do things your way, and I don't necessarily align with somebody doing it one way when I think there's a better way to do it.
I can relate. Again, it's that, and I think working around sort of people who are neurotypical, or in that really sort of a corporate environment, or whatever environment it is, I find that people are explaining a concept, and I've got it within the first few seconds, and then we continue to have another 20, 30 minutes of talking about it, by which time my brain has gone, absolutely not, done. I know that bit now, let's do something else. You mentioned arrogance before, and I know that it can come across like that. And I do try and catch myself. But it isn't that you're being arrogant. It is just that your brain has gone, okay, done, sorted, filed, let's move on. While everybody else wants to digest in that very neurotypical kind of a way.
They like to talk. They like to have meetings for the sake of having meetings. I'd rather, okay, that's what needs to be done. Let's figure out how to do it. Right, we've done it. It's failed. Okay, we'll try a different way. But there you like to discuss it. It's all seems to be decision by committee a lot of the time, and that's not something I can do. I don't. We're going to make mistakes in this world, and we're going to make loads of them. If we can learn from them, that's the best way.
I think so, and I think so for anybody who's listening who doesn't understand what ADHD is, I don't think ADHD is the right name for our type, if you like.
Yeah.
It's not it's the dopamine, it's the regulation around it, and your dopamine. So whereas neurotypical people will get dopamine release from doing something that probably you and I would consider quite mundane, we don't get that. So there's absolutely no chemical motivation to get that thing done. So we have interest-based nervous systems, and I think you and I have joked about this before, that we probably own all the domain names in the world, because you have an idea at 2 a.m, because of course it all comes with insomnia, and by 7 a.m. you've written a business plan, you've bought all the domain names, you've bought all the equipment, you've skinted yourself out, and you've got a fully ready to go business. And then what happens? Then you're like, oh, I'm bored of that now.
You get bored of it, or my issue is I get 12 more steps down the line in my head, and I've the idea in theory is brilliant, but then I'm 12 steps down the line and I just think, yeah, that's why that won't work. And then you lose the interest in the project altogether. It's like we need somebody who we can then pass that idea to and say, right, okay, take this to the next level, and then come back to me. Then I'll take it to the next level from there, and that's how it would work. But a lot of it becomes the boring part that we don't want to do, the admin side of things, and or again the mundane stuff that will put us off, because it doesn't give us that kind of dopamine that we need. We need to be excited all the time, or passionate about something all the time, and it makes it bloody difficult.
It does make it difficult, but I think it's a blessing and a curse. So I know everybody uses this phrase, oh, ADHD is a superpower. Doesn't feel like that when you're trying to open a letter and you're staring at this damn thing and it is just not going anywhere. Doesn't feel like it then. But what I will say, there are positives to having ADHD. Huge positives. We've always got great stories. I accidentally joined a cult once.
Right.
You wouldn't believe how many of my stories start like that. I bet you've got tons of stories, and you think, would that have happened if I wasn't that person to take that risk, chasing that dopamine? Would I have made some of those decisions that possibly didn't end well? But my God, there's a great story in there.
Yeah, well, you'd have done it for the right reasons at the time, and I think that's one thing we've got to accept. And certainly, when we're looking back into our past, is we made that decision at that moment in time because it was the right decision for us, given the information that we had, and that could take us down various different avenues. And I think that's the blessing of it. There's never really a dull moment. There's dark moments. There's never a dull moment where there's always something fun, and there's always a decent reason at that time for why we made that decision. But yeah, it's people talk about superpower. And yeah, for me, if it was a superpower, we could control when we use that superpower. And unfortunately, we can't. It turns on at the most random, obscene kind of times, which might, like you mentioned, could be 2 o'clock in the morning. Now, for me, the biggest superpower of ADHD is the ability to hyperfocus and literally dive deep into something, lose complete track of time, but engulf yourself in a new subject, whatever it might be. That to me is what other people can't do, or neurotypicals can't really do. That's a great thing to have, but we can't turn it on. I'd love to be able to just go, right, I need to hyper focus on this, but I can't do that. I have to, it just happens, randomly.
It does. And sometimes it takes you by complete surprise. The subject matter will take you by surprise. But it is that. And I think I'm not keen on the whole superpower thing. I know there's going to be people there who disagree because of the reasons you said is I can't switch it on and off.
Yeah.
I can't run into a phone box, twizzle round, and here comes my focus.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. It's just like, here I go. It can be at the most random times and often the most inconvenient times. I think trying to describe ADHD to people. So I've often used the analogy that if you look at my computer screen, I have got, I dread to think how many tabs open at any one time. But that's what my brain is like. There's 17 different trains of thought going on at any given moment.
Yeah.
And that's really hard to describe to people. How would you describe it?
Oh, God. I asked this question on a video the other week, and it was mind-blowing how people described it. For me, it's the difficulty of finding one clear train of thought, and you've got such a busy brain that doesn't allow you to solely focus on one thing. You've got that many things going off at one time, and it just makes it difficult to be able to communicate with others, to do certain things. The problem I've got with it's not a problem, but the ADHD is different for everybody, and that's the biggest thing to try and make sense of, really, because my ADHD will be different to how you perceive your ADHD to be. And I look at it as a lot of struggles. Other people look at it as superpowers. Neither of us are right or wrong. It's how we feel. And I think there's no textbook that's going to say, well, this is what ADHD is. Well, yes, there are books that say that, but in reality, it's an individual kind of feeling that you go through, and it's an individual disorder that you have to deal with. For me, it was all about chasing the calmness. That's why I used to do the things I used to do. But it's a bloody struggle. It's an absolute daily battle of dealing with life in general.
I think for me, it feels like we're living in the wrong structure. Everything's very, very structured. Now, structure, again, both a blessing and a curse, because doing something on repeat, I heard somebody say people with ADHD don't form habits, they have streaks. which I can completely get, because I can form a habit and I can do it every single day for 6 months. But if I don't do it one day, that's it, done. It'll never get done again. And it's that kind of, you think you've built this this maintained level of doing something, and that the most random of things can stop it, and then that's it. It's game over. Yeah. And you mentioned something then, which I really do relate to. It's finding that calm and chasing that calm. I don't think I've ever had a moment where there's not been like an itch in my brain that needs scratching. And the things that I think generally people would find quite relaxing, massage and spa, where it's all quiet, and I can't think of a place I would rather be less than in my own head with no outside external distractions, because oh boy, because that's, and for me that's part of the misconception, is ADHD is physically moving about a lot, and it's that naughty 8-year-old boy who's running around being disruptive in class, and that's not the reality for probably the majority of people. It's not the external activity, it's the internal activity.
No, 100%. And I mean, I talk about a lot of self-medicating, whether we knew it was self-medication at the time, or we could look back and say it was self-medication. But in reality, we weren't chasing the highs, we were chasing the calmness and the quietness. And, you know, for me, that was probably one of the reasons why I got into, I mean, I was a social animal anyway, and society, when we were growing up, I was going out drinking at 15 years old, you know, going around town, going into cities and things like that. They don't tend to do it in this generation, which is great. But that obviously leads you on to the next things, you know, as time progresses, drugs get brought into the equation, and then you start doing different drugs, and it's strange. I used to sit there, I don't know if we're meant to talk about drugs on this podcast, but I used to sit there, and, you know, cocaine was a big thing for me, and I couldn't figure out how all my friends were chewing the ear off everybody else, and I was sat there perfectly calm, quiet in my brain. Yes, it allowed me to drink more and got me to drink more, but I was on such a level that I'd never found before, you know, and the penny never dropped back then, because I didn't know it was ADHD.
Without that information, you couldn't possibly have made that connection. Yeah. Again, it's that feeling of being othered, you know, it's that outsideness that you think, why don't I experience this the same way as my friends are experiencing it?
Exactly. And I could never get my head around it, but obviously you then just, you want more of it, because you want that calmness, because you've never had it. You've had a brain that's been buzzing for as long as you can remember, and then all of a sudden you've got quietness. And I used to have such clarity of thought. You know, we talked then about 2 o'clock in the morning, setting up business or coming up with business ideas. My brain, when I was taking drugs, was as clear as it's ever been. It allowed me to think different things through, and people would be chewing my ear off with different things, and I'd be like, yeah, okay, I could do something with that. And, you know, it was really strange. And for me, that's another big hurdle to get over, because you're taking away, when you go sober, you take away the things that you become reliant on, because then you've got to figure out, well, how do I get to that level of clarity, but without using drugs or alcohol to do it? Now, that for me has been a massive journey that I've had to go through, and I still haven't found a solution to it, and I don't think I will, to be honest.
I think this is a really difficult one. So I haven't drank in 12 months now, because I don't know about you, it's chasing that peace, but also knowing it's really damaging, because I have no ability to moderate, none whatsoever. I will, with 2 glasses of wine and at dinner, I've already decided that I'm on rum chasers. There we go. Because it's just because you know that you can achieve that level of peace, but also the consequences that come with that, and health, and actually the sort of anxiety that you feel for days afterwards as well. You're almost in a no-win situation. So, and I think you and I have spoken about this previously, but then almost, again, talking about grief, it's that process of, okay, so I don't go out and I don't drink anymore, so therefore I don't socialize, because and I'm sure some of my friends will be listening to this, they're really annoying after drink number 3, and I don't want to hang around with them anymore. Sorry to all of you. But then I think, do they think I'm really boring now? Because I was the class clown after a couple of beers. There's some wild stories to tell. But do they not want to hang out with me anymore because I'm not drinking? What's your experience of that? Because you're 4 years sober now, aren't you?
Yeah, be 4 years in February. So I'm fast tracking it at the moment. I had to, for my own peace of mind, I removed myself away from all my social circles. And as a result, I've lost contact with lots of people. And I had to do that for my own good. I'd made the decision. You talked about anxiety. I had terrible anxiety where, I'd been in hospital a couple of times thinking I was having a heart attack. I remember being on a business trip in France. We'd not even had a big drink the night before. We'd had a bottle of wine or maybe 2 with the meal. And then the following day, I felt like I got pains going down my arms. I had to drive to the nearest doctor. I got ambulance to the bloody hospital. Got all your things stuck on, all your testing, and they came to me and just said, are you under a lot of stress at the moment? I said, well, not really, but I do suffer massively with anxiety. He says, well, this is what this is. Now, for me, that was one of the last it was a straw that broke the camel's back. It was so much. I didn't want to be in that position anymore. I didn't want that feeling of anxiety. And that for me was a strong enough reason to remove myself away from, like I say, my social circles. And as a result, you lose people. You lose people that I'm not going to try and convert them to do the same thing because they probably don't overdo it like I do. They can probably stop at 3 glasses where I can't, like what you said. 1 glass leads to 2 bottles of wine for me.
Yeah.
And then it might even lead to 3. And if it was a shit night, it might even lead to 4. But the results of that was I'm not going to be in a very good headspace for the next 2 or 3 days at all.
Exactly. I think that's a conversation that I've had is, oh, well, you come out, you just have 1 or 2. And now I'm really open. I say, I can't have 1 or 2 actually, because the second that second one's gone down, I'm ready to party now. That's it. But I'm more comfortable now. I think previously saying when you don't drink, it's like people think that I'm some kind of raging alcoholic, which I'm not. But one leads to another, and you're right. You could potentially sink, enough to kill a sailor, and think nothing of it. Whereas other people have that ability to moderate. But I'm glad that I recognise that in myself now, and I also feel more confident saying it to other people. No, I can't moderate. I don't do 1 or 2 glasses. I do 2 or 3, bottles.
That's a good thing. Society, certainly for our generation, society was built around drinking and socializing.
100%.
And I miss that part of it. It's a lonely existence going sober. There's no doubt about that. It's quite a lonely existence, understanding that you've got ADHD, because you then have reasons why you don't fit the mold, and you start to unmask and you start to drop all this bullshit that we have around us, and try and find what I dare say is your more authentic self. But as a result of that, you've got a lot of dead weight that you've just got to get rid of, and then you've got to find yourself. And I do think, and I've not necessarily found this now, but I do think you will find the right people to be around you when you're ready to. I think you've got to win the battle upstairs yourself and put yourself in as strong a position as you possibly can, and then you'll open up to others and let other people come into your life that'll be more suited for the life that you want to live now. If you surround yourself with drinkers, it's only a matter of time before you pick up that drink. You surround yourself with pals that are taking drugs, naturally we're gonna fall back. It takes somebody incredibly strong-minded to still hold that same group of friends and not touch a drink or touch drugs.
I'm going to be really honest. I find them really annoying as well now. after you kids. I find them really annoying. I don't want to hang out. That I love them to pieces, my friends.
I don't.
And but then I've noticed the difference that one drink, then everyone starts getting louder, and then everybody just because I'm not drinking, I just find everybody really irritating, and I just want to go home.
They repeat themselves, don't they, all
Yeah.
the time? It's like it's just everything is repeated. I play golf. That's pretty much my outlet, and I will still play golf with the lads that I used to go drinking with. You know, but even in the golf, they tell the same stories week in, week out. I'm like, maybe that was funny back when I was boozing, and we had these.
Yeah.
They're not funny to me now. I don't,
No.
you know, and you end up going on a different path completely.
Completely different path. So when you were diagnosed, I mean, please feel free, you don't have to answer this. Do you take medication? Because I know that there's a lot of stigma around ADHD medication. And for me, I'm quite open. I'm not medicated. Part of that for me was a fear that is, oh my God, what happens if I don't have any personality?
Yeah.
And my whole personality is basically just ADHD. That's a huge worry. Who am I? What do I do? How am I around people? Because, and I'm still in that phase now where I don't want medication because I'm worried that I would be a zombie.
So for me, to answer the question, once I was diagnosed with combined ADHD, I did the titration process. Now, looking back, I mean, and I had a really good GP, a really good psychiatrist from Clinical Partners who, because I was on antidepressant medication, or it was predominantly for anxiety. So I'd gone with the GP and tried SSRIs, SNRIs. And then when I got the diagnosis for ADHD, I was trying both. So I actually tried different SSRIs with Concerta, with Elvance, over a period of about 12 months, titrating up and down on different meds and also up and down on different antidepressants. And I came to the end, I think it was about 14 months on, I decided it wasn't for me. I wasn't feeling the benefit, or I wasn't feeling such a big difference. So I stopped, and I stuck with duloxetine, which was the SNRI that I was on at the time. And I said, obviously, this stimulant medication isn't working for me. It's not until I think it was about maybe 2 months ago that I had plenty left, and I got in contact with a psychiatrist and said, look, I'm interested in giving it another try. I kept seeing videos of people finding themselves and finding that quietness again, and all this kind of amazing changes in their life as a result of the medication. I said, well, I want to try it again. You know, I've come to the stage where I was dealing with a lot of shit back then. I'm in a completely different position to what I am now. I've lost nearly 3.5, nearly 4 stone in weight. You know, I seem to have, I just want to give it another go, but I don't want to go on them on a daily basis because, like what you said, I don't want to lose too much of the new self of me. So can I try them on an ad hoc basis? And he says, yeah, of course you can. You know, there's no reason why not. And I noticed a difference. I took, I think it was Concerta that I first took, and I noticed a difference immediately. So I will now take it on an ad hoc basis when I feel I need to get stuff done. And well, I wouldn't say make matters worse. It's actually made it better. I've come off all antidepressants now, and that was about a month, maybe a month to 6 weeks ago. And I've tried to come off duloxetine probably 5 or 6 times. And each time I was a week in or maybe 10 days in, I was just unbearable. I was so grumpy, so agitated. It just wasn't a pleasant experience. And I went back on it for everybody else's sake rather than my own, rather than sticking with it, because I just wasn't pleasant to be around. And I'm very self-aware of what I'm like. Certainly when it comes to being around my daughter and things like that, if I'm short around her, I hate it because I don't want to do that.
No.
But I did use the stimulant medication then to help me come off of the duloxetine, which, like I said, I've been off for 6 weeks now. So I will use the stims ad hoc when I feel the need to do things, actually, to open letters or to, take
And
the
perhaps
things like that.
that's something that I potentially will explore. I spoke to somebody, and this is pre my diagnosis, but I'd almost, as many of us do, I'd gone on a mad hyperfocus, diagnosed myself anyway, because I
Yeah.
read every bit of literature I possibly could have done. And she said the first time she took her medication, she goes, everything went quiet. And that was her experience. And I thought, oh, but again, I think I'm still in that phase, whereas I'm not sure how I'd feel about everything going quiet, because it's just so, for me, it's so unknown is what that quiet
Yeah.
feeling would be like. Maybe I'd hate it. So I think I hold back a little bit in terms of doing that. But it's really interesting that you can you went through that initial period and now you're using it and feeling the effects. So maybe it's about timing, maybe it's about mindset, all the different factors that perhaps you wouldn't normally consider. That's what's made the difference.
I think you're exactly bang on the money there. It's your personal journey. You've got to make sense of things yourself, and you've got to be in the right mindset or in that right moment in time where you can say, okay, well, I'm happy where I am at the moment. I'm a big advocate of everything being trial and error. If we don't try something, we're not going to know. We see, like I have said, we see videos and things like that of other people, and we kind of think, well, all right, that might make a difference to my life. I'll be willing to try it. And if it doesn't work, then we can tick that box. But you've got to be in that right position in your own world to make that decision. And I think that's the important thing. Everybody wants a diagnosis and wants a medication because they think it's going to be the answer to all their prayers. It's not.
No.
For me, you've got to go through a whole process. You've got to go through that grief that we spoke about earlier. You've got to be comfortable in yourself. And then, then it might be worth trying. But for some people, it happens like that, and they are over the moon with the results,
Yeah.
It's just your own journey, and that's something you got to go through.
I think so. On this podcast, we talk a lot about people. So we're basically preparing everybody for becoming over 40 is what we're all about. Letting people know about the things
Don't do it. They're young.
We're young, but nobody teaches about this second half of life. And that's kind of what our mission is to tell people what things are going to be dealing with. Now, while not everybody is going to get diagnosed with ADHD, I can guarantee you there are people in your life who have been feeling this way, who suspect or don't suspect, or maybe you suspect have ADHD.
Yeah.
And I think what's our message for those people? And just to caveat that is, I know sometimes people have said, well, they're not doing anything, it's lazy. And someone said, and I couldn't agree with this more, if they were lazy, they'd be enjoying it. And they're not enjoying it. Trust me, that's the executive dysfunction where you're unable to carry out the mundane stuff. What advice are we going to give to the listeners who perhaps don't have ADHD but are dealing with somebody that does, or suspect that somebody they know has got it?
The biggest thing I've found is actually communicating it, because if you're bottling up these emotions or bottling up these thoughts, they're not going anywhere. It's rare that you can bottle it up, break it down, and then work through it yourself. I've all my life I've been a closed book. I've never really opened up to many people, family, friends, partners, things like that. And to my detriment, really, what I learned when I went to rehab, I remember kicking off because there was a lot of group therapy. I didn't want to do group therapy. The reason being is I did not want to share my experiences with anybody else. And I was like, no, I want one-to-ones. I don't mind speaking to a therapist and opening up, but then at least I know it's just staying between these four walls. Then I walked into the first group session, and it changed my perspective completely, because I realized I wasn't the only one going through this shit, basically. And that changed everything for me, because then I felt that I wasn't alone. I felt that I could then share and not be judged or not be ridiculed or not, have your finger pointed at you saying, well, you shouldn't have done this, you shouldn't have done that. Everybody's actually going through a similar situation. They just don't share it. So the advice to me is, if you're thinking certain thoughts, whether you're struggling with mental health or with business ideas or in the workplace, you've got to communicate it and get it off your chest. And that can be to somebody that's anyone from your friend, your therapist, your line manager, whatever it might be. If it's ADHD, you go down these routes and don't just keep it bottled up. You go down and explore it and speak to somebody who can help advise you, or at least just shed a bit more light onto it, so you don't feel like you're on your own. Because that's the scariest feeling in the world, is being alienated from the rest of the pack, really.
I think that's really important for me, is that education. So I think that's why your channel is so important, and there's nothing wrong with sharing things with people. So sharing your videos to kind of get that information out. Even if you don't feel comfortable saying, this is what I'm experiencing, this is what I'm going through, there are channels available to do that. I think we're sort of running out of time now, but I think what would be really useful is to say some unhelpful things, things that aren't useful to say. And I'm going to go first with this one and say, have you ever thought about buying a planner? which yeah, I have thought about buying a planner. I now have 72 different planners with different textures, colours, font types, and a collection of nice new pens that I've started to fill in and will never look at again. So yeah, I have thought about a planner. Go on, you must have your regular ones that people say to you. Have you ever thought about? Or
oh, God. Why the annoying one is, well, why can't you just do it? Why can't you just do it right now? And it's like, I don't work like, if you tell me something like that, I'm naturally going to rebel. You tell me to do something, even though I was probably going to do it. I saw a video, I think only yesterday, and it was a girl that had just about to start hoovering, and then a flatmate or a partner came up and said, can you do the hoovering? And even though she was going to do it, naturally, she just, on the hoover, pulled the reel back in and just said, no, not going to do that. That, to me, it's exactly what we're like with ADHD. You tell us to do something, we'll do the absolute opposite. We are different beings. I've done the same as you when it comes to planners. Christ, I've tried everything, and for some people it might work. You've got to find out what works for you and what doesn't, and
it will be, some things work for certain people, but I think for those who are living with someone with ADHD or suspected ADHD, whether it's diagnosed or not, is saying those glib statements is often really, really unhelpful.
Oh, and it cuts deep to us, because we take it personally. Naturally, we are going to take that personally, and
very
we'll
much
probably overthink that for the next 3 or 4 days, or more, or the amount of crap that we get said to us, that then builds up, and it's a snowball effect, and then we'll have a blowout, we'll have an argument, or we'll have to do something, as a result of this snowball effect. And for me, that's what used to happen. I used to then go to the pub because I could not deal with that crap anymore. I just needed to go to the pub, drop all that kind of headspace off at the door, walk through, and just go, I can relax a little bit. Yeah, and find some peace. But yeah, the best solution I ever had, and we talk about admin, we talk about doom piling with mail and things like that. I had a PA that worked for me, and I said to her, as part, when I was looking to employ someone, because I realized I'm good at certain things, I'm terrible at others, and owning up to that is not a bad thing, it's a really great thing. And I said to her, look, this is what I'm brilliant at, this is how I like to communicate. When I'm client facing or I'm speaking to anybody, I'm great. What I can't do is then follow up with the follow-up email, follow up with an invoice, open my mail. I can't do any of that. And she says, okay, well, I can deal with that. I'll redirect all your mail to me with your permission. And she had everything of mine, personal, business, everything. And then she'd put it into a diary, which works for me on an app, shared the diary with her. And then she'd communicate with me by phone or by WhatsApp. And I swear to God, my life changed as a result of that. She's retired now, and I'm yet to find somebody who can do the same for me.
You want to be paired up with somebody who, and this is for every aspect of life. This isn't just ADHD. Is we all function better when we have the other people who fill those gaps, and we fill certain gaps. It's like the big blue sky thinking. It's like the wild, crazy ideas, the innovation, the crazy business ideas, whatever it is.
Yeah.
We are good at that bit and the other bits, but then some people are very, very detail oriented and very, very good at those bits, but perhaps don't do that level of thinking. So I think we all fit together, and I think it's just maybe now is our time to shine in celebrating the bits that we are good at, and not being afraid to say these are the bits we're not so good at.
Exactly. And that's, if you can look at yourself and recognize what you're not good at, you don't necessarily need to work at the bad things. Just concentrate on what you're bloody great at. You know, you do the great things. There's always, like what you said, there's a detail orientated person that can work with you, behind you, for you, that can pick up all that stuff that you can't deal with. And they can do, that's what they love to do, you know. But for you, you love to be the big picture person. You love the ideas. You concentrate on that. And if you can find that, be it in, like you say, in work, in a relationship, whatever it might be, you're going to thrive. But too many times, we then beat ourselves up because we can't do the stuff that we're not good at. So we then try and force ourselves to do that, which just has a knock-on effect with us.
I think, Fran, just on this call, we've come up with another business idea. We should probably go and buy the domain names, and we'll have a matchmaking service between detail-oriented people and then people with ADHD.
Like a dating site,
like a dating matching service. But the problem is, you and I'll have this idea now, and then we need somebody who's detail-oriented to make it happen.
How many apps have you want? I mean, I've had so many ideas for apps, but sort of coding or anything like that, I'd be like, oh god. And then you go and get a quote for an app to be built, and it's ridiculous.
Astronomical.
Next project.
Brilliant. It was, do you know what, it's really, really nice talking to you. You can find Fran over at headnooks on TikTok and YouTube, I believe, as well. Go over, give him a follow, share his posts, and hopefully, Fran, you'll come back for another episode in the not too distant future.
Anytime. Thank you very much for having me.
Nice to see you. Take care.
Yeah, you too. Take care.